Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this, the first webinar hosted by the APM's Portfolio Management SIG. My name is Stephen Parrett. I am chair of the SIG, and I've been on the committee since the SIG was formed in 2010. The purpose of the SIG is shown here, and we use these aims to demonstrate and determine what we do, including subjects that we address, the type of events we put on, and the media through which we communicate. Starting with some short events in the evenings, we've increased our range since 2014, and in that time we've put on 3 successful one-day conferences, had several articles published in magazines like Project, and have done a bit of research on portfolio management, including a survey last year, and some results have been published on our website. We're now using webinars like this one today to try and reach out to more of our members and others interested in portfolio management. And this is one of our events in our calendar going forward. We've called it a SIG roadmap. We've got a number of activities on here which are planned over the next few months and taken us into 2017. And 2 things I'd like to point out in particular that may be of interest to you. One is a membership survey that we launched last Saturday. So if you are a member of the SIG, please take part, as we're keen to find out what you think of our current plans and other things that you might like us to do. The other important event flagged up there is the 11th of May conference next year. Some information will be coming out to you about that shortly, and if you are interested, do register yourself, and then look forward to other communications later when we tell you more about it. Now, regarding today's webinar, we've got a fairly simple agenda. I'm pleased to say that we have Paul Morgan talking about his work at SABMiller. This follows on from a very well-received presentation he gave to our 2015 conference. And his subject today, of course, is portfolio analytics. He is joined by Mosenthal from North Highland consultancy, and between them they will talk for approximately 25 minutes or so, giving you some insights into their work. During the presentation, you're welcome to post questions using the on-screen facility. At the end of the presentation, I will aim to put some of these questions to Paul and Will. It's possible we won't have time to respond to all of them, in which case the summary of the questions and responses will be on our website shortly after the webinar. Now, this webinar is being recorded and will be available for everyone in a few days, I believe, and as that's really all I have to say at the moment. Do enjoy what's coming up, and I'll now pass you over to Paul and Will, who will take you through the next session.
Thank you, Stephen. So, hello everybody, I'm Paul Morgan. I've been at SABMiller for 7 years. Within that time, I've worked my way up from portfolio analyst to then managing the European portfolio until I became Global Head of Demand and Portfolio Management for our Global Business Services function. Working with our regions and 38 countries, I define, prioritize and manage our portfolio of projects throughout the year to ensure that we're doing the right projects to drive business value.
Hi, good afternoon everyone. My name is Will Mosenthal. I'm a manager at North Highland. I've recently completed a year working with SABMiller, where I was the account lead. So a little bit about North Highland. We're an organisation with over 2,000 professionals based across the US and United Kingdom, with a number of partnerships across the world as well. So 2 of our areas of expertise and focus are in the program and project management space, as well as focusing on data and analytics. So these are 2 areas that we've helped Paul and his team with at SABMiller, and that we'll be showcasing today.
Great. So first I'd like to thank you for joining, giving up your time to know a little bit more about portfolio analytics and how that it can be effective within an organisation. So this is intended to be a case study, charting my experiences within SABMiller. We'll take you through the objectives. I'll then pass you over to Will, who's going to take us through the approach and methodology. Then I'll go back and demonstrate the dashboard itself, describe the outcomes and lessons learned, leaving enough time for some questions. So before we get started, I'd like you to join us in a quick poll. And that question is, how would you rate the maturity level of portfolio reporting within your organisation? Low maturity would refer to basic charts, data tables, using something like Excel. Medium maturity would be utilising a project and portfolio management tool to introduce more complexity and insight. And then finally, high maturity would refer to multivariate, self-service, near real-time reporting that's customizable depending upon your audience. I'll give you just under a minute to complete that. Okay, thank you very much for taking part. So looking at the results there, we got 67% that are low maturity, 28 that are medium. So I guess the majority being low, I think this is great. This means that hopefully you can take some of the pointers from the journey that we went through that I'm going to describe today. Thank you very much. So a little bit about SABMiller. Prior to its takeover by AB InBev in September of this year, SAB was the second largest beer brewer in the world and a FTSE 20 company. It had 70,000 employees and operated in more than 80 different countries. And in 2015, our revenues were $26 billion and a pre-tax profit of $6.4 billion. So a pretty significant organization. Within my business function, Global Business Services, we had a distributed portfolio management function. There was a global portfolio management department, which I was head of, and then also regional teams that reported into regional CIOs. We worked together using a virtual team rather than me having formal reporting lines to these guys. As a result, I was required then to collaborate with all regions to enact change on the way we do things. So a little bit about our objectives. When I first arrived, there seemed to be a big reliance from my team to provide copies of the portfolio at sporadic times in different formats to a variety of stakeholders. This was utilizing significant resources for my team, and I wanted to make this simpler, more streamlined, and allow people to access this when they desired without that reliance on my team. The second point was a personal objective of mine since coming into the global head of portfolio management position. This was to build a more effective relationship with the regional CIOs and ultimately provide value to the leadership team. And finally, my department anecdotally was seen largely as the bean counters or bookkeepers, tracking our spend at a given point in time versus budget. I wanted to shift this perception by making the department more strategic and ensure that we were proactively providing insight to aid decision making, not just providing historic information. As a leader of this department, I had a clear vision in defining a portfolio management strategy, taking the department from that medium level of maturity to a high level. This included improving our governance, our ways of working, engaging with senior stakeholders in a better fashion, and building my influence with the regional and functional teams. Now, we're not going to go into all of this during our webinar today, but we're choosing specifically to focus on the portfolio analytics part. So now I'd like to hand you over to Will, whose North Highland team have done a fantastic job in supporting us through this improvement project. Over to you, Will.
Thanks, Paul. Okay, so in terms of the challenges that Paul and his team were facing when we started helping him out with this, I think the big one for me was that, as Paul touched on, there were a number of offline spreadsheets which were capturing all of or held all of the portfolio data, and there were a number of requests for reports to be built out of these, largely on an ad hoc basis, and this was drawing a significant amount of effort and time for Paul and the guys in his team, and there were also a number of questions around the accuracy of the data in those reports. What I would say as well when we came on board to be supporting Paul here was the context of everything else that was happening in SABMiller at that time. What this really meant in terms of the timing with the takeover by AB InBev was that there was further scrutiny on the accuracy of these reports, and really even more demands from the leadership within Global Business Services for more reporting, more and more accuracy around the data within those. So, I mean, just for a little bit of context as well in terms of North Highland's involvement at that time. So we were running a service of business analysts who were supporting Global Business Services with a number of projects and initiatives. And we brought an analyst on board to support Paul and his team, and we also lent on a lot of subject matter expertise around data analytics and visualization of reporting. Okay, so in terms of our approach, so when we started out, we really spent a lot of time working with our target audience for these reports. So that was the Global Business Services Leadership Team. What was key here was that the information that we were reporting on had to be useful to them. It had to meet their needs and objectives. That was the #1 priority. So we spent a lot of time working with that group as well as other stakeholders involved in the process of managing the portfolios and the various regional and corporate portfolios that sat across SABMiller. So we ran a number of workshops, really made sure that this was a very collaborative and iterative process, so that we were working through things as we were going and making sure that it was meeting the requirements of our stakeholders here. And what we came to as we were going through that process of analysis was deriving 3 key insights or questions that became the real focus for everything that we did throughout the project and throughout the management of the portfolio after that. Paul's going to take us through this in just a moment when we actually go through the dashboards themselves. So I just wanted to call out those questions so that it's at the forefront of everyone's mind. So the 3 points that we looked at was, how is approved budget tracking against the plan for the year? The second one was, how effectively are we managing our pipeline within the portfolio? And thirdly, is the portfolio optimized for value? Okay, so how do we actually do this? So as we mentioned before, there was a big problem with the raw data that we were working with. This was largely down to them being in a disparate collection of areas that they were being stored. And then off the back of that, Paul and his team were having to run a number of manual reports and do a lot of manipulation to that data on a regular basis, which was drawing a lot of amounts of their time. So we did a big exercise to clean up the data and to break a number of the linkages between those data points within the portfolio management tool that SABMiller used. So we did this piece of work with the objective that we succeeded in building a database table or one single source of the truth that all of the data would sit in. So this involved a bit of number crunching and manual work on our effort, but also involved the collaborative effort with the partner organization who hosted the portfolio management application that SABMiller used. So we didn't need to introduce any new technology. It was more about adapting what was already there and cleaning up the data within that. So once we'd gone through this exercise, we were then able to run reports in a matter of minutes. It was the source of the data was one single database, so a single source of the truth, and we developed a fast process for extracting that data from that tool, and then a series of refreshes that saved literally hundreds of hours of time for Paul and his team. And one of the big benefit of this was this meant that they could then use their time and energy on more value-added things aside from running reports and cleaning up untidy data. So I want to talk a bit about the visualization now, and Paul will go into more detail on this in just a moment. So the key thing here is I've touched upon the 3 questions that we're going to go through in just a moment, but the key piece in terms of how we were visualizing and calling out the reports in the portfolio was going through what the deltas in the forecasts and the budgets were for the portfolio. Another requirement for the leadership team within Global Business Services was as an ability to drill into a number of different combinations across the data sets. That might have been across markets or regions, functions within SABMiller, as well as cost types within the portfolio. So without further ado, I'm now going to pass over to Paul.
Thank you, Will. So guys, we're just going to get into the dashboard itself now. So as Will mentioned, we've got 3 key questions that we were trying to answer for our senior stakeholders, and 3 dashboards that I'm going to walk you through. Just a comment in terms of the data. Obviously, we've had to anonymize this in terms of the figures, the projects, the benefits for commercial sensitivity reasons. But this was the shell of the dashboard that we've actually used. So the first question, how is our approved budget tracking? So this is about our current position versus our budget position. On the top left-hand side, we've got approved budget over time, which charts our journey from the start of the financial year to our current data point. And I guess one of the benefits of using something like an analytics package is that you can get more information if you hover over the data point. So for this example, you can see the change since baseline of minus nearly 12%. So in this example, we would be in a healthier position than we were at the budget. The second graph here is a snapshot of our forecasting profile throughout the year. Obviously, it isn't linear. We're effectively spending slightly less at the first few months, looking to spend more towards the third and fourth quarters of the year. On the right-hand side at the top, we've got our top initiatives ordered by approved budget. Here we've got a useful slider where we can access additional, more projects, or we can have less projects if we want to focus on a specific number. And again, that hover over information will call out things like which business function the project's associated to, whether it's in delivery, in the pipeline, or completed. So yeah, lots of information there. We'll talk about the different areas and I guess the options that we can associate with our dashboards. So if we wanted to look and drill down by a specific IT type, we could do that. If we just wanted to look at our initiatives relating to data center and server infrastructure spend, that would affect all of the charts on the dashboard. Again, portfolios, if we wanted to drill down at a sub-portfolio level, we could do that. And if we were focused more on our OPEX project expenditure or CAPEX expenditure, we could do that as well. So fully interactive. The next piece, going a bit further down, we've used a kind of visual graphical representation here. So the bubbles denote the size of the spend in relevant countries, and obviously, you know, we can drill into specific countries here. So if we were to focus, say, on Australia, you'll notice then that the charts are looking very different. They're focusing then on the top initiatives that are relating to Australia or the Asia-Pac region. And that can also be used not just at a country level, but also from a regional level. So for the country level, you've got stakeholders such as the IS leader within country that could present to his management or her management the portfolio to the status of that portfolio. From a regional view, this would be useful for our regional CIOs who had sessions with their management team, or also their combined leadership team. So if they wanted to look at the initiatives across all of their associated countries, they could do that to understand what our current spend against the budget is, what's our top initiatives in terms of spend, what's our mix of spend across the different business functions. So the last chart at the bottom here was those business functions. So again, if we wanted just to look at our commercial initiatives, which is useful for our functional communities that we have within our global business services function, they could then focus on what our mix of spend across the regions are, across obviously the countries, and also the top initiatives, the overall budget for that given business function. So lots of information that's fully interactive there. The second dashboard is how effectively are we managing our pipeline. So this is how we're tracking our commitments against our approved budget. The term unbonded, which you'll see a few times, is effectively the authorization to spend money, which I manage using a fortnightly governance forum. On the top left-hand side, unbonding over time, we've brought through that approved chart that you saw on the top left of the previous chart, of the previous dashboard. We've then got the unbonded amount tracking throughout the series of time. And then we've introduced a third element, which is our target, effectively our KPI on our expected utilization throughout the year. This is to ensure that we're not holding on to money until the end of the year unnecessarily, nor are we burning through it at too fast a rate. On the right-hand side, This really gives a snapshot of our mix of things in pipeline, demand stage, delivery, completed or cancelled. And a bit further down, this then starts to show the breakdown at a global level. So 49% is unbonded, that we've got authorization to spend against our budget. And we can then start to drill that down to get a very different picture at a regional level, and then obviously also at a country level. And you'll notice that the graphs start to interact here. So if we were to focus on Italy, for example, we've called off authorized to spend 28% of their budget. And how does that look in terms of the snapshot? They've got 3 projects still in pipeline, they've got 6 projects in flight, and 1 that's closed and completed. In terms of their target, they've unbonded slightly less than we would expect their target to be. So that would promote some proactive conversation. In terms of the third and final dashboard that we had for our senior management, this was all around benefits management. The top right hand, again, is aggregated net present value. So this is our planned cumulative benefits from the initiatives within our portfolio. A little bit further below, we've got the top initiatives, this time ordered by their net present value. And again, we have the slider option to bring in more projects, the hover over feature to provide more information around which country, region, and business function. On the right-hand side, we then have what we call a heat map, which is effectively that scale that you see here that I'm hovering over around good net present value within our countries or not so good net present value. So we can see some good examples like India, Italy, Czech Republic are kind of on the green side, and then we've got some countries a bit further below on the red-hand side, on the red shade. We can also start to then view this by business function. So the overall net present value, we can see that a lot of the benefits are largely within our commercial function, as we'd largely expect. We can focus on that, which then shows where we've got perhaps really good benefits from a country perspective, the top initiatives within that business function, and then our mix of spend against our IT categories. So again, fully interactive. If we wanted to look at our spend across the different business functions, the different IT categories, etc., we can do. A fourth dashboard that we mocked up to use internally, which I'm only going to show you briefly, was effectively to show any forecast outliers for us to engage with the responsible owners. So you'll see here we've effectively per project we've got the green bar, which is associated to our approved budget. The blue is referring to the unbonded, the authorization that we've called off against that budget. And then the line here is the current forecast that sits within our portfolio and project management tool. So this would at least warrant a conversation to the project manager if it's in flight, or the business partner if it's in demand, to obviously look at the difference between the forecast and the approved budget. Again, with this project, we've got a much smaller forecast than what we have as an approved budget. So that can easily rectify, using a visual way for my team to have those proactive conversations with the required stakeholders. So those are the dashboards. I'm just now going to take you through the outcomes. So 3 outcomes here. The first one, we managed to phase out, as you heard from Will, a number of reports that existed within our various regions and provided a new comprehensive reporting function. This was then used by different regions and departments to build on further for their own purposes. We improved the data quality and cleanliness, drastically improving compliance and forecasting information, and we had an approximately 60% reduction in time taken on reporting across our virtual portfolio teams, whilst providing more comprehensive and accurate information. We basically got smarter about what we needed to do using the automation that North Highland assisted us with, as well as much as possible, and we set expectations with our stakeholders on our reporting cycles. In the second point, we gave our stakeholders 24/7 availability access to these dashboards. So as you can see, they could focus on their country, on their region, drill down by various cost types, see their top initiatives in an easy-to-use graphical interface. They could then build the stories for their management that was most relevant to them, without the need for customizations or special requests per stakeholder group. And this also gave me a platform to meet with regional CIOs to build a relationship and give them instant value for themselves and their teams. This improved both the perception and the value of my department, as we were no longer considered post-mortem bookkeepers, but strategic partners on their portfolio success. The second point, providing transparency of the portfolio through these dashboards to our stakeholders allowed them to view how other countries or regions were performing relative to themselves. This had the benefit of enhancing portfolio behaviours and performance across the regions, with their natural competitiveness coming into play. And finally, there were some real tangible benefits. Following its launch, we managed to shift the conversations from the quality of data to start making effective and informed decisions. At the leadership level, the first dashboard that you saw highlighting our top 20 initiatives led to constructive conversations and the subsequent cancellation and reduction of the overall budget, saving around $10 million. We effectively moved from providing data and reports to being a trusted partner to the leadership team to make necessary decisions on the project portfolio. And they also felt much more engaged and had a better understanding both of the composition of our portfolio and its current position. In terms of lessons learned, I think our sponsor support was crucial. My manager was willing to invest the time during the prototyping stage to review and provide feedback. This significantly changed and improved our end result. It also brought him into the process, and he was happy to champion the results to his peers within our organisation. Also, the nature of analytics tools means that you can easily experiment, work in an agile way, and try things to figure out what will work best within your organisation. It's simple and quick. Secondly, it's important for you to have a view of what happens after you've developed these sets of dashboards to present to your management. Think of how you're going to maintain or enhance them, as well as who can support them if you have technical or functional problems. One of the key benefits of recent analytics packages are that you don't have to be a developer to create the dashboards. Just primarily have a logical mind and a keenness to learn. We trained a number of in-house resources which gave them extra responsibility, developed their skills, and provided job enrichment. And thirdly, it's easy for these things to get out of hand and you end up creating more dashboards than you have stakeholders. Focus on the key questions that you're trying to answer and don't bend to every request that you get from someone that you show these to. One of the things we could have done differently was to ensure working closer with other departments and have more consideration on what should be the wider strategy for our business unit. We had a situation where my function had these dashboards, and in addition our delivery PMO team had some really useful, more project-specific dashboards, focusing on detailed forecasting, RAG statuses, risk and reporting. All very valid things, but we should have done more on how best to bring these together for the benefit of our users to create a single user interface and service. So in summary, I think portfolio analytics can be a very cost-effective and high-impact method to really engage your senior stakeholders and provide meaningful decision-making support to your whole organisation. And it's not as difficult as you may think. But coming back to our poll question at the start, your organisation needs to be ready. We were at a medium maturity for a couple of years before moving to high. It also took a lot of work in the right conditions. I was able to define the vision, leverage an opportunity that we had with the context of our takeover, gain sponsorship, and had a number of stakeholders frustrated enough with our current reporting limitations who wanted us to move to the next level of maturity. So I hope that you found this case study useful. Please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn and contact me if you have any questions that we don't manage to cover during the Q&A session. I'll be happy to discuss these with you. Thank you.
Hello everybody, it's Stephen Parrett again. Thanks for bearing with us and hearing what Paul's got to say. There's quite a few questions coming in, and it's part of my role to see if we can get these answered before we get to the end of the webinar, or if not, we'll carry them over and let you know. We've got Ben and Melanie asking Paul what portfolio management tool or solution do you use? If perhaps you could just summarise broadly what that might be, if you you haven't done so far?
Yeah, sure. I guess one of the points that we did put in the brief out to the attendees was that this was planned to be agnostic. The tool that we use and that we used within our organisation was the HP, Hewlett-Packard PPM tool, which I think was just about on the top right-hand quadrant from a Gartner scale. And I think in one of Will's slides he called out the analytics organisation Tableau. So those were the two applications that we were using for our portfolio.
Okay, a couple of interesting questions from Stephen Jenner. Stephen, welcome. We know you have a lot of interesting thoughts on this subject. He's got the first question regarding the NPV and asking, is this the net benefits, that is benefits less cost? And he has a supplementary question as well, Paul. How do you address the benefits of enabling and the non-financial benefits? Two questions effectively.
So this dashboard was specifically excluding the non-discretionary initiatives. I think to the point of the second question, there are obviously, particularly within an IT-based portfolio, there's lots of things that we just have to do. So this dashboard was looking at, of our value-adding initiatives, where were the positive NPVs, and looking at that from a functional country region perspective. Yes, the net present value was benefit less cost over the 5 years. And that was automatically calculated as standard by the HP PPM tool.
Thank you, Paul. Two related questions.
One caveat in terms of the numbers was that was anonymized, yeah. Okay, that we said. Thanks, Stephen.
Okay. Two connected questions from Steve and Mark. Steve Leary, Mark Hennessy. Asking about the effort involved in inputting the data and who does it, whether it's done centrally or by country, and allied with that, does it integrate with systems such as SAP?
Yeah, so I mean our model, obviously I guess it's contextual, so we have a number of business partners within our countries and our regions. They're responsible for the relationships with the business and owning the demand. So from a budget perspective, they're the ones that focus on inputting the demand into the tools. So we give access to a number of users across our 38 countries that we had within our portfolio. So very little done in the centre, and similarly with the project managers. So if we're delivering things within market or if we're delivering things centrally, the project managers are responsible for inputting that information directly. And I think as I kind of went back to some of the shifts that we made with our operating model, with our ways of working, this wasn't always the case, and there was a big reliance from individuals in the centre, and that was where we weren't getting ownership of the data from the people that were responsible for either the demand or the projects, and we often got into a situation where people were saying, that's not my numbers, things have changed. So making the individuals accountable for that information to be right in our single source, that we were championing, and we had a good support from my director, that really turned the conversation into that more strategic rather than the data-driven one, which I spoke about in the outcomes. Did that answer your question, Stephen? The question that was put? That was one part. Is there a second part I missed?
The connections to any other systems. Do you have other systems which you integrate?
So I guess we had to be realistic with given the conditions that we were in changing the company. So we weren't directly going into our ERP systems. So yeah, but what we did working and the ideas that were coming from North Highland were, how do we automate that information going into the PPM system? So there were some bulk uploads that we could do routinely, quite easily for financial information once I'd finished my fortnightly governance forums, so that we could update the information of changing approved amounts and new projects added to the portfolio very, very quickly. So we didn't completely revolutionize our ways of working and the systems integration, I think that Will alluded to earlier, but we just did things much more effectively with the timelines and the resources that we had for us.
And a question from Andrew, which I think connects to this a little bit. Just checking that what was the quality of the data that you had in terms of, was it a working version and snapshot, or was it a fairly accurate and rather than a what if? And perhaps could you do modelling with this at all?
It's so flexible, and you know, the Tableau wasn't the only package that's obviously available on the market. It really is what's important to you and your organisation. You could certainly model scenarios of, you know, if we need to reduce the portfolio by X amount, where would we potentially reduce and make those cuts? So it's very, very flexible, and obviously it looks very good, and it's quite easy to mock up. So I'd encourage, obviously, just to look into it a bit further. You know, be clear on what your requirements are, and absolutely, yeah, I don't see any reason why it couldn't do that.
Paul, would you say this is a question from Helen? Is this a scalable model? It sounds like it is. Scalable.
Well, obviously we're a fairly large organisation, FTSE 20, so it scaled well for a significant organisation. I don't see any reason that you couldn't use it. I guess the point I was making for the lessons learned is that we spent a lot of time getting to grips with our portfolio management tool in previous years, and even then it was only the work that North Highland came in and did for us that we actually fixed some of the real bugbears. And you know, we had 8 different reports that we're pulling together. We were VLOOKUPing to provide a portfolio report before we did this work, and we now got that into one integrated report in the PPM system. So you've got to do some, you know, the kind of devil's in the detail. You've got to fix that underlying foundation so that you're not building on quicksand. And I guess it's what I was trying to convey is that it is a journey, and you need to have a level of maturity before you whack this on top, because it's only going to be as good as the foundations that you build it on. So it is scalable, but I guess be sure to ensure that you've got, you know, some of those foundations, that you've got trust in your data, that you I guess to Steve's point earlier, that you're quite clear on who is responsible for managing and owning that information as well. But absolutely.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Gail is asking some data quality issues in general. You may well cover a little bit of that. Perhaps I could comment on that. Yeah, sure.
So we'll talk a little bit about some of the broken links that they helped us fix. Some of that was just us making changes to our systems over the years. We were using different forms, and historically we had a couple of regions using one demand form or a project form, and then the other regions on another type. So consequently, not all of the information would necessarily kind of feed together. So we had a few issues there that we looked to solve once and for all. So we put some specific changes in the system, and we bulk uploaded the missing information, obviously working with our business partners. So that was some information there. And also, I guess, it was around the kind of ways of working and that responsibility I keep talking about, that we didn't have 100% of our organisation using our portfolio and project management system for their forecasting, for their demand input, until really I came in and we insisted that at the start of the next budget round, in order for your item to be considered for the next budget, you need to put this into the tool. This is the minimum information that you need to put in, and you need to do it by this date. And you know, once we tried a carrot approach for a number of years, this stick approach had very, very little resistance. As long as it was clear what was required from people and when it was required by, that really did the trick to get us to a minimum threshold, that minimum data quality that we needed to provide analysis across the whole portfolio. And we really then drove from some people not really fancying using this tool or spending 5 minutes in their week to actually you know, input information, to, you know, this is a key part of their week, or, you know, something that they absolutely have to do.
Thanks, Paul. Daniel asks, what would your advice be for building dashboards that where the quantity and they quantify value outcomes in non-financial terms? He says they rely on subjective RAG status, which can be challenging when different stakeholders have different views. Do you have a view on that?
Yeah, I guess one of my key stakeholders was the finance director, so we were largely geared for meeting our budget. Hence why a lot of these dashboards obviously are quite numerical based. For me, if we've got non-tangible benefits, or we've obviously got a number of essential projects, maybe we're doing lots of mandatory legal work or things that are business critical, I just make sure that we have those categories within your portfolio and project management system so that you can then look to report on those. I think too often in my European days, we started taking stuff out of the portfolio and project management system and then adding another layer of kind of categorization or classification to some of those options. And I guess it created a lot of work with then it just being a snapshot and it not then being updatable, maintained. So I think be clear on what non-quantifiable things that you want to categorize, if that makes sense. If it's intangible benefits, then pick 5, 10, or 3 different categories that you can make sure that these initiatives are rated against, and then you can report against them.
I'd say keeping the categories as simple as possible would be key there.
Okay, Paul. A supplementary question from Jess regarding that, I think, is when you get requests for new charts and reports, what sort of formal change request process you have, picking up on your recent comments about the need for simplicity?
So we do have a fortnightly change board. Changes can be logged into the system, and that is something perhaps that, because my analyst ran the super user forum, that she would then take the requests as a kind of qualify, make sure that we're not just kind of accepting things to the change board, that people have actually thought about things and making them kind of go through there. And then we have a kind of across our delivery organization and across our demand and portfolio management organization, we discussed the relevant change. The sponsor was there to request the change. So we did have a change request process. In terms of then actually making those changes, I think I was quite keen to ensure that we didn't deviate too much from what we had, what North Highland had socialised through our stakeholders, that ideally and primarily this was meeting the needs of our top 50 employees within our function and what information they were required. So I didn't want to dilute that and lose the message. So we were quite strict on changes, and I think the key thing was to ensure that if something was region or country or function specific, then that isn't a good enough reason necessarily to put that in. If it ticks another, a couple of other boxes on our criteria, then that's a different conversation. But we effectively provided this information. They could download the data behind it, and if one region wanted to go into other information that was in our project and portfolio management tool, they could obviously report on that and then look up against the rest of the information that we were providing. So we didn't bend over backwards for each of the stakeholders, and really took a call on it from that perspective, Stephen.
Okay. Jonathan asked an interesting question about how long it took to get from the original position you had to the new system and get it properly embedded across the organisation. And perhaps you could also answer Catherine's one regarding the prioritization, whether that looks at prioritization and scenario planning as well.
So in terms of time, we had some support from North Highland for a while I was transitioning over. So they were supporting me in terms of some of the strategy, some of the wider improvement piece. But I think we're talking around 3 months in terms of fixing some of the issues that were on the approach slide that Will walked us through. He mentioned we had a full-time analyst there that supported me. I guess from my perspective, that was kind of 1 day a week from me as well. And I think that took us through understanding some of the underlying issues with the data and the change requests with our vendor to fix that. It also did, we did some whiteboarding and really all the approach that Will walked us through from the as is to be, that was about 3 months. That included, so I launched the dashboard here from the reader, but we made this available on a website, so getting that on a web server, we obviously had some help from our architecture team. There was a license implication for the developer licenses and things like that. So there are a number of different things that we had to do and put together. But yeah, that effectively made things live on a server, available through any internet browser for our executives to read that, provided a security group so that not everybody had access to these dashboards, which we were quite keen that we didn't necessarily have lower level employees accessing all of the information on the portfolio that we're providing. So number of different components, about 3 months, full-time analyst, and at least a day a week from my perspective to obviously curate some of the design, drive some of the engagement and the stakeholder support.
I guess one minor thing I'd build on that is we really treated this as a separate project, so that the analyst on the team was focused on developing this for Paul, so that Paul and the guys in his team could focus on the day jobs, because the portfolio still needed to be managed. There still had to be regular governance cycles that had to be gone through. So in terms of carving out roles and responsibilities across the team, it was quite key that we didn't just do this as a bit on the side. It was clearly articulated across all of the stakeholders and the leadership that this was something that we were doing as a project alongside the day job that Paul and his guys had to do.
Yeah, really good point. In terms of the prioritization, we didn't necessarily, I guess in terms of having to do a prioritization, we didn't necessarily use the dashboards for that. We utilized our system. We had obviously strategic alignments to our initiatives. We looked at our risk and we looked at the net present values and the profitability that we had associated with that. So if we were to prioritize, we already had a methodology for doing that, and that would be the area that we agreed with our IS leadership team of, if we took budget cuts, that was the way that we would have to reprioritize the initiative. So I guess we wouldn't directly necessarily kind of rely on the dashboard to do that for us. We already had a way of working that was agreed, an agreed part of governance within our portfolio function.
Thanks, Paul. A question on one of your earlier comments at the beginning, part of your presentation. The difference between bonded and unbonded. You've got an explanation for that?
Unfortunately, it was a word I inherited from a few predecessors that doesn't exist in the English language. Yeah, and it's particularly not very good when English is not our first language, which is a lot of our stakeholders. So effectively, we agree a budget at the start of the year. Then throughout the year, I run fortnightly governance forums that agrees authorization to spend against the budget. So just because an initiative made it into the budget, it still needs the right business case, it still needs to be assessed from a solution perspective, have a business case that's agreed by the sponsor. So there are a number of steps actually during the financial year that need to be covered before there's permission to actually start to spend the money. And in that permission, we don't necessarily call off all of the budget that initiative had. So it's authorization to spend against the budget, not my word.
A question regarding the skills needed to put this into place. If there's no PMO or other specialists who demand the dashboard, what kind of knowledge and skills do you think are required to do this kind of work?
So I might answer this one. So I think one of the key points Paul actually already made was around the willingness to learn, and so that the analyst who joined our team didn't have a lot of background and experience in heavy data projects and analytics,
programming,
or coding, programming, but he was very keen to learn about Tableau and to fix the problem that Paul and his team had. So I think that's one of the real benefits that tools like Tableau. It's not just Tableau, but there are lots of other similar products out there as well. What is available on the market now, you don't have to be that coder or developer to get the benefits from what the product can do. We did use some of our internal expertise in North Highland around data and analytics and visualization to really lean on best practice, what's worked well elsewhere, in order to shape our thinking and guide that. Yeah, is there anything else you'd add to that, Paul?
I think it's a really good point, and we you know, you can even take an Excel data set. If you're running your portfolio on Excel and you don't have a portfolio management tool, you can take that and put that into an analytics package and then start to create the charts that we had here, and obviously lots of others that are catered for your need. And we really did have people, this is designed for people within the business to then start to own this stuff, to be able to manage it themselves. So you really, I guess, to kind of emphasize the point, you don't need to be completely technical. So no, I think you've covered it in terms of the curiosity, logical, analytical, you know, and that kind of keenness to learn new things. There's a lot of information now around about, you know, what would a good portfolio dashboard look like, and obviously, you know, there's a number of providers that can help as well.
I think just to reiterate one last time, one of the points we've made a number of times is actually sticking really rigidly to the requirements and the questions we were trying to answer, and being really logical and strict with ourselves and with our stakeholders around that was really key here. So for me, the dashboard, the output, the final product that we produced here is really it's clean and simple, because we've kept it in that way. There isn't anything in there that is just in there for the sake of it being a flash bit of wizardry in Tableau just for the sake of doing it. It's all there and it's all got a purpose. That was really key as well.
Yeah, I guess knowing exactly.
I think there's one more question before we have to sign off, and we'll have this one from Nick asking about whether there are any issues with using Tableau with other software.
Well, I guess we're just we're a case study from using one system into Tableau, so I guess probably best to ask them, or maybe to canvass opinion, maybe through a kind of LinkedIn question, probably to other people that have tried. So sorry, from our perspective, you know, it dovetailed absolutely fine.
Okay, I think, Paul, that's probably all we've got time for this morning. If other questions come through, we'll do our best to provide some answers.
Sure.
As explained before. Thanks very much, Paul and Will, for all your efforts in putting this together. We've got Ryan at the APM who's been helping us through the last few weeks and getting organised for this, so thanks to you and your team there. On behalf of the Portfolio Management SIG, thanks for taking part. If you want to know more about what we're doing, you'll be getting an email from the APM after this, and it will give you some links to find out more. So please do that if you wish, and get in touch if you want to let us know your views. Once again, thank you very much, and for everyone, wherever you are, goodbye from us.